Start, as usual, with the national anthem. But before we do that, just allow me again to thank you. Will be your moderator again today. My name is Peter Alingo. I'm excited again to be with you today. Please, let's rise, all of us. Let's rise for the national anthem so that we can all begin. Could we have it projected, please, so that we can carry on? Thank you all. Thank you very much. Thank you for that. Okay. Those who are at the door, please just come in because we are starting. We want all of us to settle down so that we begin straight. Allow me, as we begin, to just recognize a few individuals, guests who have joined us today, who were not with us yesterday. I take this opportunity to recognize Ambassador Anthony Okara, Project Coordinator, ProPeace. Ambassador, welcome. We have also a couple of our donors who were not there yesterday, but who are represented today. The Solidarity Center, represented by Alex Ogutu. Alex, welcome. We have International Idea, also right here. We have Antonine Riang. Welcome, Antonine. And we have Dr. Lawrence Mute from UDPK. He's a former commissioner, Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. Welcome, Dr. Lawrence, to this session. We are happy to have you here. We also want to recognize our virtual participants. They've been with us since yesterday. They are still there. And we recognize you, our virtual participants, wherever you are. Be part of this. We are excited that you are still keeping up with us. But we have a chat box that you can be able to use for us to share your views and any other comments, questions that you have. So feel free to use the chat box, all our virtual partners, wherever you are. I would also like to remind all of us that we have, I want to say hello to all of you, our virtual partners, wherever you are. You are all welcome. We also have a link that we wanted all of you to know, at least share with you. This is a link you can share so that we can also continue with the virtual participation and virtual engagement through the networks and the partners that we have, each one of us. So the link is, where is it? Where is the link? Please let everyone be able to see that link so that they can share with the networks, so that we can also expand the horizon and the scope of the participants that we have through our virtual platforms. Yes, I will be doing a recap of tomorrow so that we are able to have a context upon which we will build today. So that will come in a short. But just allow me to underscore the fact that we are continuing with the themes that we set out to since yesterday to guide us through the 2 days of this symposium. And today, what we are looking at is basically beginning with elections, accountability, leadership. Then we are looking at integrity in elective office, but we are also looking at elections and peace, then cohesion and mediation. So that is part of the thematic areas that we will focus on in the early session this morning. And that will lead us to two critical thematic areas, which are electoral reforms and political party processes that we'll also be able to look at today morning before we break for lunch. So that is how rich our menu is for today. And we can assure you that we have a team of experts and experienced people, individuals who will be able to share with us perspectives as key presenters and also discussants as we move along. But we'll also be able to have plenaries so that you can also enrich this through your own contribution, comments, questions, etc., etc. In the afternoon, we will look at two critical areas. One, in keeping with the themes that I have shared today, we'll look at elections and special interest groups. And then we will look at media and elections. And here we'll look at aspects of media monitoring, including the emergence and the influence of social media, particularly in the last elections that we had. So that is basically what we have today in terms of how we will move with our program. But at this time, I just want to share a couple of recaps with you in terms of what we did yesterday, so that we are able to build on that today and be able to move on based on a clear understanding in terms of where we are coming from since yesterday. Just allow me to just set it up so that I then bring to our attention the couple of things that we were able to do yesterday. If you look at the program, you will be able to see day one. We looked at a couple of themes day one, but day one we were also privileged to have keynote speakers, and we were privileged to have the chairperson, Justice Legal Affairs Committee, National Assembly of Kenya, the Honorable George Murungara. We also had a number of speakers who presented key speeches And this included the chairperson of the National Gender and Equality Commission, Joyce Mwikali Mutinda, Daktari. We also had from our own chair, the ELOG chair, Madam Anne Hereri. And we had from our national coordinator as well, Mule Musau, who did set the context for us for the discussions, engagements that we had yesterday. So the key things that I want to highlight, there are just a couple of things. One of the things that we were able to understand clearly is that, one, there are certain challenges that we are able to see, particularly in relation to the endeavor to reform laws. You know, some of those outstanding legislation that were not able to be passed before the general elections on 8th this year. One of them is the campaign financing law, and also the law in relation to the 2/3 gender rule, you know, operationalization of these particular legislations. But one thing we learned is that there are serious challenges with this, particularly Parliament, and we were told candidly by none other than the chair of the Justice and Legal Affairs Committee of the National Assembly, that members of Parliament have problems with these legislations, you know. So that means that we have to go back to the drawing board. And he was candid enough to tell us that however much we'll try, even if we push through the courts, members of Parliament have problems with this. One, the campaign financing law, in as much as it is critical, the sentiments that he raised were that there are segments, elements, areas in that law that members of Parliament think that are not workable. So that particular piece of legislation will require to be reviewed. And that is the reason why Parliament keeps deferring the implementation of that particular law. Now we've seen it 3 times. Now, in relation to the 2/3 gender rule, again, he mentioned it very clearly that there are problems with that, particularly in relation to how to realize the numbers at the National Assembly, you know. And that means that as stakeholders, actors, we have to, and right holders, we have to go back to the drawing board to rethink how we can reconstruct, reconfigure some of this so that we are able to then find a better way to move forward. Yeah, we also heard from the chairperson that his committee and he himself will this year, in this 13th Parliament, be very supportive of reforms that we think will be useful in this election cycle as we move towards the next election in 2027. So that, again, was a challenge to us to begin thinking through some of those critical reforms that we think could sail through, we think we could push through, we think we could support through advocacy. And that was also the message that we were able to clearly get from the chair of the National Gender and Equality Commission in terms of the challenges that still undermine the progressive engagement of the communities that belong to the special interest groups. We will be discussing that again today, hopefully to identify some useful pro-SIG recommendations that we can push forward as part of our advocacy. Then we came back to our own challenges in terms of what we were able to see during these elections, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, you know, and focusing on how we as stakeholders, civil society actors, and duty bearers, as well as right holders, can be able to engage together to make this next election cycle, particularly the coming election in 2027, much better, much improved, based on the experiences that we were able to see in these last elections, but also cumulatively, picking from the past experiences, the experiences from the previous elections, So issues like technology, for example, picking from 2013 when we began and looking cumulatively through the perspectives that the Supreme Court was able to give us in 2017, the experiences carrying through into 2022, when we were able to see some progressive developments in terms of how we utilize, how we deploy, and the value that we are able to get from technology, particularly in relation to the three components where we in Kenya have adopted technology, which is voter registration, results management, voter identification, and results transmission. Those are the three components where we have adopted technology progressively in terms of the complementarity that is required under the regulations and the Elections Act. So moving forward, we will also be asking ourselves, and that was the key question, whether in Kenya we want to continue with technology, and if we want to continue with technology, how better do we improve it? Because it keeps recurring. It keeps recurring as a feature and an area of contestation, looking back through 2013 into 2017 and 2022. Those are issues that keep recurring. We also looked at the question about the structure or the strictures of the electoral management body again. Questions that keep recurring, including those that are ongoing at the moment, which we have no answers to, but we continue seeing attacks, issues being raised around the configuration, the structure, the strictures, the working, whether internal or external, of the EMB. And so some of the questions that were arising yesterday was, how do we move forward, right? And perhaps we might need to think outside this and begin reflecting on experiences in the past. Where are we coming from? And how have we evolved our EMB? And how best do we now move forward to make it more suitable? Is it a question of the electoral system? Or is it just a question of, political bad manners, trust, confidence? These are the questions that we were asking ourselves yesterday. But they are important because they are also helping set the stage for today as we move forward to interrogate the themes that are also very, very much aligned with some of these. Then we looked at the participation, particularly in elections, and one of the key areas that we were able to isolate is that in relation to special interest groups. The observations that were done, including in the diaspora, noted that there are still challenges, there are still gaps, and that is an area where we need to work around, particularly the concerns around, grouping together communities and just describing them, a blanket description that sometimes allows cracks through which others fall through and therefore get neglected or get forgotten. So these are some of the challenges that we need to also relate with as we move forward. Diaspora, we were told that, perhaps it is a moment to now reflect on better, more improved progressive engagement of the diaspora in correspondence with the kind of contribution that they are able to make, the fiscal contribution that they are able to make through the remittance that comes through them. And if you look at reports from the Central Bank of Kenya, you will be shocked how huge that contribution is. But in keeping with the Constitution, in terms of progressive engagement, progressive focus, progressive creation of opportunities for these special interest groups, what do we now start to think about, right? One of the things that we were also able to talk about is that in terms of how we move forward, we need to keep reflecting all the time, because it is in engagement that we are able to come up with best approaches, best ways to manage our elections, particularly our own expectations. So one of the things that came out was the need for us to keep discussing so that we are able to provide, progressive guidance from all of us as actors who are engaged in this, duty bearers and right holders, particularly duty bearers. We were able to interrogate the role of the judiciary in more detail in terms of how useful that was, how progressive they were able to engage, and how retrogressive they were able to engage as well. We looked at the role of the Supreme Court of Kenya, and we were able to also isolate some of the challenges that we were able to see, particularly issues around the threshold in terms of the standard of proof. We looked at that in detail, and we had comparisons as well, comparing what the Supreme Court in Malawi has done and what we have done and how it has been dealt with in Ghana, based on our respective constitutions and what the Constitution says, particularly in relation to how we are able to get the magic number in relation to the threshold of 50 plus 1%. Just very quickly, we also talked in terms of what is coming for ahead of us, in terms of the gaps that we have. So one of the areas that we were also to reflect on in terms of law reform is a focus on the referendum law, and also a focus on the boundary review that is coming up. Need to begin to reflect on that so that we have a law that can be able to anchor the upcoming boundaries review process. Voter registration, we also focused on that and identified the challenges, particularly the low numbers that we were able to realize through the two voter registration drives that were conducted just before the elections. But we were also concerned. Concerns were raised around the low engagement, low participation of special interest groups, particularly women and the youth and others, and how we could engage them much better so that their participation is enhanced. Technology, I've talked about that. I think we also talked about the challenges that we see, particularly in the court process. EDR, determination of conflicts, resolution of disputes around elections, the timelines, the institutions that were engaged, the jurisdictions that they have, the overlaps, and how those can be reconciled so that these institutions can be able to work better, discharge their mandate better, and be able to determine disputes within the time that is allowed. A particular concern was raised about the constitutional timeline of 14 days for the Supreme Court, and the need for us to begin reflecting around that if we think this is something that requires review, reform, so that, we are able to then provide a more suitable timeline for the Supreme Court to be able to determine the petitions, particularly the presidential petitions. What we were told also is that EDR is still an ongoing process, you know. The presidential petition was just part of it. There are a couple of them that have been filed all around the 47 constituencies that will be determined also in the coming years, you know. And this is part of the process that the judiciary, particularly the Judicial Committee on Elections, prepared judges for, and they will be handling those moving forward. We were also able to speak to the political actors. We had a representative from the Office of the Registrar of Political Parties who was also able to share with us engagements, progress, prospects, including challenges with regard to the engagement of political parties. And we also raised quite a number of concerns around that. Yeah. So those are just some of the few things that I wanted to highlight. So as part of setting the stage for today, just to remind ourselves of the things that we were able to handle yesterday around the thematic areas that we identified and focused on yesterday. So with that, allow me to come back to the program for today, day 2. You have it before you, please. Day 2, and we'll follow just that. The only thing that has changed, just the speakers and the discussants, but our themes remain the same. Our talking areas, our focus areas, through the discussions, through the speakers, remain the same. And for that reason, we will be just starting straight away into the first session of today. And in that regard, please allow me to sit. Yes, please allow me. We'll be calling 2 key presenters for today, and that will be Ambassador Antonio Cara. Please kindly make your way to the podium. Mr. Abraham Misoi, Program Manager, Transparency International Kenya. Please make your way. I did not mention Ambassador's title because I had introduced him earlier on. Then the discussants that we'll be having today are Mr. Eusebius Tamalo, Parliamentary Desk Liaison Officer, KCCB. Please make your way. Eusebius Tamalo. And then our own Latif Shaban, Program Director, SUPKEM, also member of Dialogue Reference Group. Please make your way to the podium. Very well. So Ambassador Antonio Cara and Abraham Misoi will make some key highlights. They are the key presenters, but because of time, they will just make key highlights so that we have a robust engagement, discussion around this that can also give us time as plenary to engage with them. So, Ambassador, in just less than 10 minutes, you and Abraham, so Ambassador will come first, then Abraham will follow. In just less than 10 minutes, share with us some thoughts, some highlights. Asante sana, karibu.
Yes. All right. Good morning, everyone. First of all, let me thank everyone especially the organizers, for giving us the opportunity to participate in this. My name is Antonio Cara, as you've been told. I've been having the privilege for the last 10 months or so for running a project that we call ProPeace Kenya on behalf of the NCIC, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission, as well as the European Center for Electoral Support. And the idea was to provide support to our institutions in this period, especially of the elections. The European Center has had experience in more than 54 countries around the world in participating and supporting electoral activities. And the reason why we chose to work with NCIC is that it is legally mandated. It's a unique organization when you look at the global spectrum that has a special focus on supporting cohesion and integration and promoting peace in this particular period. And it's a unique, in most countries, that element is performed or undertaken by the EMBs. But here we've divided into 3 parts, and that we found very useful and helpful. So in that regard, what I'll do is to very briefly touch on some of the key issues and experiences we had in the last 10 months. We share that with you. We are coming from an experience where in the past, the main state organs, the executive, the judiciary, had a very wary look and engagement with the citizens, with the civil society groups when it came to deep issues of elections. But over time, we've seen marked improvement and engagement, and that is something that you may wish to consider and celebrate as we look at the gains that we've made. When you talk about an organization, or how we organize our elections and how we engage, there are a number of factors that you may need to take on board. And for Kenya in particular, we have the tendency to look inward and continue expressing our dissatisfaction, which is okay. But when you look at it against the overall continental, the way things look in Africa, there is a lot to be celebrated in terms of what we've been able to achieve. Not to sit on our laurels, but there is a lot to be celebrated. I'm just coming back from an event in Maputo where we are being looked upon as a country that needs to be emulated, that needs to be celebrated, and that what we did in the last 2 months was somewhat of a miracle, especially in the African perspective. So just to throw a bit of positivity in what has happened, but not to see it, we need to build on it. So we really appreciate what has happened, but we need to continue growing our organizations. And when we look at the last 3 or so elections, there has been progressive or marked improvement at each level. Now, one of the challenges along the continent, when we are described as underdeveloped countries, and in some cases, fragile countries, the key thing has been to how do we, as African countries, improve a number of things to achieve the development we require. And one of the key challenges has been, number one, our institutions. And this cuts across the political institutions, the economic institutions, and the social institutions. And it is in the social arena that we find or we come across the faith-based, that's the area in which they operate, and they form a core of our institutions. And why are these institutions important? The citizens for whom all this is being done, they perceive and interact with the state on the basis of how and the level at which these institutions are operating. And the key factor that cuts across all this is trust. What is the level of trust these institutions, these citizens have towards any of these institutions? And if the trust is low, what do the citizens feel they need to do to protect their personal interests? And it's at this level that we begin to relate and interact with ourselves on the basis of maybe organizing ourselves into groups that fight aggressively, maybe militancy, and therefore peace is interfered with. We talk about, I remember we had an event in Ethiopia once, and we're trying to express to them our experiences on the continent in terms of integration. And I remember the private sector asking us a very interesting question. Even as you focus on integrating the regions, what are you doing to talk to the members of the African Union, of IGAD, of the EAC, to focus on integrating themselves first before they seek to integrate the countries? And that's a question that I think we normally we are looking to resolve by having the NCIC and things like that, that you need to have cohesion and integration within the state before you can go out. And that integration also determines the level of trust that you have for one another and the strength of your institutions. In our cases across the country, what we've noticed is that I think there was even a poll undertaken. When you look at the institutions and what the people feel about them, the faith-based leadership has, I think, the highest level of trust. That's the one that the citizens feel best represents their interests, not ideal, but it's the most trusted. And that therefore gives it a very key role in bringing along everything else. To organize proper elections, to organize proper interactions with the people, you need strong institutions, you need capacity among the players, both the EMBs, the civil society and everyone else, your capacity. You need to have efficient processes, and you need to have a good framework, so a playing field, maybe a level playing field for interaction. But without trust, all those things will not help you. And that is where, again, the faith-based organizations come on board. We have been, in the last 10 months, engaging in areas of great fragility. We've seen challenges, for instance, around central Kenya, in Isiolo area, where you have about 4 communities that interact. There are projects we've been running there. And part of the tension that we saw among the different communities is based, one, of mutual suspicion to one another, the issues of pastures and the basic stuff that they're fighting for in terms of access to them. But it's how they perceive possibilities of resolution that provide the challenge. And because they have little trust in the state institutions, they resort to having violent confrontation. And the actors that have been very useful in working closely with the NCIC has been the faith-based groups. There have been cases where, for instance, even in providing basic access, there is access to water and building of dams. There was a case where we had to get the faith-based leaders had to intervene to provide an opportunity to develop a borehole to give water access to 2 communities in the Isiolo area. Without the intervention, that would have been impossible. And because of that opportunity, we did organize about 5 different interactions in the period leading up to the elections. And that, we believe, was a contributing factor in reducing the possibility of disrupting elections in that area. So we have that direct engagement and involvement of faith-based leadership. Now, one of the things that the NCIC did in implementing its roadmap towards peaceful elections was organizing 6 symposia, where we are looking at the people that shape opinions, opinion leaders in political space, in the religious space, and other places. And the first symposia was with the faith-based leadership. Arising from that interaction, what we saw were messaging improving in almost every week in terms of and whenever we had church masses, services at the mosques, every Friday, in every place, there was always a message of peace being conducted. And so we were trying to reap or take advantage of that high level of trust that existed with the faith leaders. So in addition to the direct intervention, you have opportunities of general influence when they begin to discuss that, reminding us that we are part of a country. We need to have that, to remember our role as citizens of that country and as children of a higher God. That has been a very useful process in promoting the peaceful process. And The leaders can participate in this manner, but there's a limit to which that can be done. In the long run, you still need to go back to strengthening institutions, to strengthening the capacity of the players, and so forth. Now, one of the other things that we did as a project was to then organize leadership and training capabilities around the country. And these trainings, we trained about 200 people directly, and indirectly over 2,000 got the benefit. This goes towards dispute resolution. How do we resolve disputes when we encounter them? When you have low trust, how do you engage one another and resolve disputes? So this is an area that we've been active in, and it's an area that we need to continue doing as a people to build our capacity and ensure that we can then engage with one another. In terms of processes and efficiency of systems, I think a lot has been said. I'll not want to reiterate, but when we engage with the NCIC, with the IEBC and other players, the level of technology that was employed, there's a lot of, I think in this particular election, it was very successful. But going forward, there are areas that we need to now build on, and I think that will come through as we engage those players. I'm sure if they haven't already mentioned it, I'm sure it will come as we continue working. One of the things that when you look at the West and the countries that we're told are the ones that are successful when it comes to organizing and implementing democracy, there's a factor that always doesn't seem to come out. Our constitution has been praised that it's one of the best or the best written or developed documents that exists, and we're very proud of it. But when you look at the countries that you're seeking to emulate, the US Constitution, the Australian Constitution, these are documents that do not go more than 10 pages. How is it that these huge developed economies have documents that are really little, a few articles? You know, when you look at the US Constitution, it's only 10 articles. When you look at the Australian Constitution and so on, why is it that with such few documents written down, you can build such powerful economies and have such strong systems of operation? There's that element which we'd like to emphasize of traditions and norms. The difference between ourselves and the West is that we had our own governance systems, which we completely cut from when we embraced this Westphalian model of governance. And when we grew up in our education system, we completely embraced those structures, the constitutional systems, and the assumption was that once it's written, it will kind of self-implement. So we believe, in fact, I remember in my first days in government, anytime there was an issue, the first thing that anyone would propose, let's have a law on this or a law on that, with the thinking that once it's written in law, it will self-implement. But the factor that is always missing is that what the West did through the constitutions is to capture the key elements of what they were already doing in their form of governance. So it was much easier for them. So for them, they understand from their definition who a leader is. It's part of their tradition. When they are sitting in their homes and having discussions around the dinner table, who is a leader? Who is a virtuous person? Who can you trust or not trust? Those values are captured in their documents, and with simple documents, they can relate to it. But what we've captured is not consistent with the way our cultures and traditions are done at home. So, one of the things that we need to begin embracing and developing are traditions and norms that are consistent with our written law, so that it is easier to implement. Because what we expect in terms of implementation and what is written are normally two different things. The faith-based leaders can assist in helping us build these traditions. As I wind up, just to emphasize my point, I've always asked the question, when you look at us, when we are having, for instance, the basic things, a marriage, there's a traditional process that we follow. And all of us understand what it takes to be married. The moment you undertake that, the introduction of parents, you have the dowry negotiations, all those things are done with complete dedication and understanding. It's only when that process is complete that the marriage is accepted. But where is this written? Yet, we really embrace it and own it. But what we've written in our constitution, we don't embrace. So that's the gap that you need to resolve through traditions and norms. And until you have those ones, you'll always have the gap. So, as I wind up, because of time, just to reiterate that having faith-based leadership involved and engaging in our electoral systems is something we need to build on. We can embrace, but have structure as we approach them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Another clap for Ambassador. Thank you again. We can quickly go to our colleague Abraham Misoi. Please come to the table. Just 10 minutes. And try to look at you as well. Signal you.
All right. Good morning. I was listening yesterday and watching virtually the proceedings of the day, that was yesterday, and someone mentioned that to just avoid collision for protocol, allow me to just use to observe everyone in the house and say good morning. My name is Abraham Misoi. I'm representing Sheila Masinde, the Executive Director, Transparency International Kenya, and I'm the Programs Manager. I'm going to speak about Chapter 6, or Leadership and Integrity. Just give a few remarks or a few areas that to ponder around as we even enter into the discussion and even the plenary, maybe later after that. 2017, Transparency International Kenya, with other stakeholders, we initiated a campaign that we dubbed Red Card Campaign. And this was basically to red guard those people that we felt they would not meet the threshold of Chapter 6 of our Constitution to run for public office. In 2022, that is this year again, we, under the umbrella of National Integrity Alliance, we have a number of partners here. We again did the same campaign with the same motive to ensure that the threshold that is put, that is in our Constitution, Chapter 6 again, need to be upheld to ensure that those adversely mentioned to have been implicated on corruption-related issues and issues that largely focus on integrity are not given the opportunity or cleared to run for public office. All these were geared towards ensuring that we uphold the Chapter 6 of our Constitution. Of course, we all understand 2010, when we had a lot of spirited engagements and we wanted a new instrument to lead our country or to help us put structures in place and to have leadership that, or to have some instrument that is in, leading our country in a progressive and in a way that will make everyone happy. Of course, we understand, even in the whole world, our Constitution, the 2010 that we passed as a country, it is touted as the most progressive constitution in the world. And of course, we know it culminated a number of engagements, and people, when you saw the video, if you had an opportunity to come earlier before, you saw what the Reverend Joya and all other veterans who were able to fight for the good structures and systems that my brothers talked about, having good systems and structures, they had to fight to ensure that we have all these. CSOs were part of it, faith-based organizations, politicians as well, those politicians who were progressive at that time, including other stakeholders. And of course, there was a lot of massive stakeholder engagement before the promulgation, as they say, the 2010 Constitution. But one thing that struck, or that is really striking, is citizens made sure or made a lot of presentations and thoughts around having a chapter within the Constitution that will support or ensure that we have leaders of integrity occupying public office. And that is Chapter 6 of our Constitution. That is how it was born. But unfortunately, as I mentioned about the Red Card campaign 2017-2022, we still see quite a number of these people or these politicians or these leaders that we think they are not fit to hold this public office. Why? And we have a structure, we have a system that is supposed to have helped us to have these people of integrity occupying this office, and they're otherwise not occupying this office. Chapter 6 has not been implemented to the latter. If we go by the elections that are passed since the promulgation of 2010 Constitution, then if there is something to write about, then we cannot write about. There is nothing to write about when it comes to Chapter 6 of our Constitution. And I want to highlight 3 key reasons as to why the Chapter 6 is facing a number of challenges. One of the reasons is, one, there is lack of clear institutional mandate as to which institution of the government is supposed to clear this or vet the candidates who are supposed to run for public office, the politicians. We know it's very clear, KRA, the mandate is to clear on issues, tax compliance. EACC, basically, that is where they're supposed to clear and ensure that people of integrity run public office. But again, when you go back to the IEBC again, IEBC are also saying they are also supposed to hold issues around clearing and vetting these politicians. So there is an overlap when it comes to the clearance of these politicians or people to run public office. And that is where we have a challenge. So for us as an institution, I'm at Transparency International Kenya, we hold the view that EACC, they need to have the sole mandate to ensure that they vet and they clear these people to run public office. Sole mandate. And then we leave IEBC on election matters as it is. The second reason why we are having the issue or around Chapter 6 facing challenges is lack of objectivity or proper standards on Chapter 6. We talk of criminal issues, we talk of gross misconduct, all those ethical and moral standards that are supposed to be upheld by people who hold public office. But then the question, when you go to Article 99 of our Constitution, Article 99.3 of our Constitution, what does it say? It talks about one is assumed. If all the avenues of appeal or reviewing the sentence have not been exhausted, then whoever is running for this public office need to be allowed to run for it, which is again contradicting the values of or the ethics or the thoughts of around Chapter 6 of our Constitution. That is where we have an issue. And the reason why we have an issue, Article 99.3, again, is there is an assumption that Chapter 6 violations are assumed to be criminal in nature. Not all of it are criminal in nature. Think about the gross misconduct. Think about lack of patriotism. Is that criminal? Think about acting in breach or in a manner demeaning that the office the person is running for or is holding that office. So does that mean it's criminal in nature? Again, that is another question that we need to look into as people of this country and also as stakeholders to ensure that we ensure that there is no contradiction of the law. And yes, we need to get clear thoughts around it. Of course, Another thing is, if you think around it, look into the time one takes to get through the judicial process. If you take a case to court, the appeal processes, the sentence and reviews, how long does it take? I heard someone says yesterday talking about 14 days for presidential petition is not enough. And we are looking into how long does it take one to get cleared or even for reviews to be done so that we can have some of these cases upheld and people of lacking integrity not to be allowed to run for this office. So it's a tricky balance that we need to know. As much as the petitions, of course, on this other end, then we also need to look on this other end, how long does it take for such reviews and judicial processes take so that we cannot have people running for office who have not, moral standards and meet the threshold of Chapter 6, running for these public offices. And my last point on the challenges on Chapter 6 is lack of public appreciation. Of course, the public, we've had a lot of, and I know some of us here, some CSOs here and other stakeholders have had a lot of spirited engagements, creating awareness amongst the people, messaging through the social media, the radios, the TVs, a lot of engagements. But at the end of the day, and since they are the gatekeepers, they are now the citizens, since they are the gatekeepers that makes either these people to be elected or not to be elected, then there is a lot that need to be desired from the citizens. They need to appreciate that they are the gatekeepers and they're the ones who hold the key to people of integrity running to this or being elected to this public office. We know in this public domain, one of the senior government officials before, to the run-up of this election 2022, mentioned that 40% of the people who are running for public office, politicians, they were either engaged in illicit financial flows, money laundering issues and all those other issues that revolves around corrupt deals around money laundering. And what happened? When you look into the list that we have, those people were adversely mentioned in the Red Card campaign, and also we earmarked them not to be cleared. Quite significant percentage of them, around 56% of them were elected back into the office. Of course, we've made some strides as an institution and under stakeholders in ensuring some of them are not elected. Others were barred from being cleared to vie, and others, of course, they were, because of the Article 99 of our Constitution, they were allowed to do the vying, to go for the seats. And unfortunately, some of them were elected, and fortunately, some of them were not elected. So that is our thoughts as an institution, and those are the thoughts that I have for you. Allow me to finish by saying, if we allow people who have mentioned advisedly and have lack integrity to be elected into office, of course, the seeds of corruption get into our public office. And what happens? It will grow. And when it grows, it hardens up and transforms into trunks of impunity. And that is very unfortunate. Thank you so much.
Another clap for Abraham for the great thoughts around integrity. Yes, now my two good friends will come in to provide us just short, quick perspectives on the discussions. I will start with senior. Okay. Yes, he has allowed Bwana Atamalo Eusebius come and share a few things.
Yes. Thank you very much. I'll focus my input on the role of faith-based institutions and organizations in enhancing peaceful and credible election throughout the electoral cycle. As you know, election is a cycle. And thank you, the first presenter, for pointing out the trust vested on religious leaders. These institutions are not just FBOs, but their leadership. So you talk about church, you talk about the institution, the leadership, and then the masses, the us, the you and me. So we have 3 points that we need to focus on here. Number one is on the preventive role that the religious leaders and our institutions bring to the dialogue. Then we have what we call reactive role, and then transformative role. So under preventive role, what were we able to do as FBOs, jointly working under what you call the dialogue reference group? All our bishops and most of our clergies were long-term observers who were able to observe election throughout the cycle. And we had panels at county level and national level, what you call peace panels, where politicians had to sign peace accords so that they can embrace peaceful campaigns within their localities. And this time round, you can agree, even at county level, there was less conflict compared to previous elections. Nationally here, we had a mediation panel of bishops. During bombers, you saw the fracas that happened, the bishops were there, and some of them got hurt. Some of them were still being treated up to recently. That commotion, because we call that shuttle diplomacy. The bishops were able to meet the president differently. They were also able to meet IEBC, both camps, the 4 and the other 3, just to listen to them, what are the issues. They were able to meet the president, appealing to him, kindly, you are the symbol of national unity. So at this time when somebody wins, hand over power in peace. And they listened to us. They went to Raila. They told Raila, now if you don't want to agree with the results, go to court. And Raila did that. He went to court. So that's what we call the shuttle diplomacy of the church. Because they have influence and accessibility, we no longer go to streets like during Muge. Because those days, Kenya was not the same the way it is. We have a new constitution. So nowadays, you'll not see bishops running in streets. They send people like us, what Mkondo, to do what? To run there. But them, they have the platform. They can reach the presidency directly, bilaterally. They can also meet these institutions bilaterally. So when you come to transformative role, they've been trying also to influence these laws. You know the role of church in constitution making in this country. During BBI, we're able to give amendments and also submit it to that JLAC. And the report is there. All that we said no to, even the court said these things were not good. So the church did not just sit on the fence. They've been doing the shuttle diplomacy and be part of this dialogue and changes in the society. So sometimes you say, the church, where are you? When the church is there, the government say, no, go back to the pulpit. So nowadays, the strategies are different, but the church is there. Even before the announcement of results, I can tell you, both camps called the church. When we went to the chairman, the wife was in tears. Please, I surrender. Even said, I've surrendered my husband to you. So we're wondering what is happening. Is it some death threat or what? So a lot of things happen behind the scene that we may not know. Another thing, using our structures, we have what we call continuous ecumenical civic education program, where we teach people about peaceful coexistence in the society and also voter education. Others wait till the tail end of the day, but through our structures, even the use of pulpits, the presenter here talked about the messaging. Press statements every week, as urging the country to be calm and embrace unity, even as we went for election. So these are things that we cannot take for granted, and we need to encourage our religious leaders to continue with the same spirit. The Kenya is big, and mostly you'll find out that at the town centers, there's civic education. But now at the remote areas, it's only church that you'll find them there at small Christian community levels, use of our radio, media. We really tried this time around using the media to civic educate the citizens and also promote peaceful coexistence in the country. And we also have a strong interfaith with our Muslim brothers. We don't just work as Christians alone. And through that, we've been able to embrace peace in this country. And that's why you saw a lot of peace this time around. Though in the 2017, we were to ask, why just peace and not justice? Where is justice? This time around, the religious leaders also tried meeting the judiciary. They made statements saying that when you're coming up with this recommendation, let there be justice. We want to see justice even in these judgments that we make. So they've moved from just preaching peace, but now we're also emphasizing there can be no peace without what? Without justice. That's why we also focus on strengthening these institutions. Bilaterally, through bilateral dialogue with these offices like political party, we met them as the church leaders. IEBC, we met them. How prepared are you? We had to ask them, are you really prepared? When they said there was no money, the church leaders also advocated for speedy allocation of these finances that they did. So the church, I can say, as where I stand, they've been very active, and you don't see us in street, but it's a change of tact. So a lot is happening on the ground. Thank you very much. My senior.
Assalamu alaikum. The Lord is good, and all the time. Yeah, we are very happy to be here, and also let me add my voice to thanking the organizers of this very important symposium, including those who put the money together, because without money we could not be here. So also the donors that are here with us, we really appreciate your support, and we expect that we'll walk this journey for many years to come. I was ambushed by my good friend Peter Alingo to be here today, but I appreciate that our chair from the Dialogue Reference Group, Reverend Kivupa, could not be here. That's why I allowed my friend from the Catholic Church, where Reverend Kivumba is our convener, to speak first. And then I come in as partners in the Dialogue Reference Group. It's not possible to begin this conversation without going back to the events of 2007-8. And Ambassador, I really appreciate you for working very closely with the NCIC, because that is the institution that really is mandated to make sure that we all love each other from the state perspective, as much as the faith leadership in this country, through the leadership of the religious umbrella bodies, complement that environment so that we have a 360-degree circle where we all fit in. We have the government on one side, and of course the faith leadership on the other side, where all of us, whether we are Christian, Muslim, Hindu, or any other religion, fit in the center. Kofi Annan, the late Kofi Annan, when he came into this country because of the problems we had in 2007, the first group he looked for was the faith leadership. At that time, we did have a very vibrant interreligious council of Kenya, which was mobilized to quickly look for the leadership of the different religions in this country so that we can together engage with Kofi Annan and his team and the international community that was at that time was very concerned with what was going on in Kenya. And I can say with the grace of God, we did manage collectively to speak to the antagonists at that time, because really they were not speaking to each other. But because they all belonged to one of our religious faiths, we became the ambassadors of that process. With intervention of Kofi Annan and ourselves very quietly in the middle, but very, very active, eventually the country found peace, and that gave birth to the Dialogue Reference Group. We believed that we should not disband because the country now was on a good political trajectory. We needed to continue informally watching the events as they unfolded. And I want to thank the leadership at that time. We had the political leaders at that time who embraced the idea, and the Dialogue Reference Group remains to this date. And we have intervened quite severally without you realizing. There was a time that teachers in this country went on strike. Do you remember that? And we had our children staying in our homes for 3 weeks or 4 weeks? It was very difficult for all of us. And I want to share with you that the president at that time came to us and told us to visit him. And he put all the ministers in charge of our economy, our education sector, the judiciary, everybody was there. And he simply said, I can't pay these teachers. I just can't pay them. These demands are not realistic. And if, in any case, if we did do that, then there will be a domino effect that will destroy the country. And we listened. The Minister of Finance spoke, the AG spoke, those leading the education sector spoke, Kinama Goha and everybody else. And we realized that the president had a point, and we went back to our infrastructure. Fortunately, the religious infrastructure in this country is second to none. The Christian faith, I think, has more infrastructure than government. The Muslims, in our own way, we have so many of our institutions where messages reach very, very fast. And we did agree to talk to our people and tell them, this time around, I think we need to listen to the government as they make effort to speak to the leadership of the teachers. And the country was pacified. And the students went back to school. Nobody took credit for that. It was a collective effort by Kenyans. Now, fast forward to the politics and the processes of 2022. I want to assure you that we did not just wait to be again called to the table. We began discussing among ourselves as early as February 2021. Inasmuch as the IEBC will now take center stage and NCIC will come into the picture once again, what would be our role? And we had a series of meetings under the DRG at Fungamano, preparing the country that we are watching, telling the politicians we are watching, telling the office of the religious, office of the political parties we are watching, so that the environment is not poisoned by any of the contestants. And these messages kept on also being given in our religious gatherings, in our social gatherings. And we made it very, very clear that we will not allow our country, in the transitions that we are all going through, a presidency that is ending their 10-year tenure, and the contestations around that, to poison the minds of our people to the extent of hurting each other. And it worked. And we saw some of the areas where they are normally referred to as hotspots. Let's say Kisumu, for example, Nairobi, for example, Mombasa. These are the three areas, maybe Nakuru to some extent. For the first time, we saw the young people coming out clearly in the media and saying, no, this time we will not fight. And they kept their word. They kept their word, and we know today in this country, we are very peaceful because the young people refused to be used by politicians. We want to commend the IEBC for standing firm by discharging their mandate. We want to commend the leadership of the faith sector by standing together with the IEBC. And as my colleague has just said, our leaders were seen clearly at Bomas, standing with the IEBC shoulder to shoulder, giving peace and comfort to Kenyans that we believe we are on the right track, and let's allow the IEBC to do their work. With those few remarks, let me assure you that faith leaders are still here in this country. We are still working together, and we will continue doing the same for many years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dogo Kaka Senior Abdulatif, Kaka Tamala, Ambassador, and Kaka Abraham for the presentations and the reactions. And I want to thank you also, the plenary, for listening. I just want to remind ourselves that we are also virtual. Please remember that. We have virtual participants, and we shared the link. I think it was shared. If you don't have it, please let me know so that you can have it. Share the link with your networks so that we can continue to engage virtually. And please also remember to get to your Twitter handles and tweet as we engage. Those are critical things. I will allow now for plenary so that we can interact with our presenters and discussants. And please, because of time, I'll request that we remain just very quick, very short. Ask not more than 2 questions. Make them very quick, very short, very focused, and targeted to the presenters, each one, any of them, or the discussants. So I will just do 2 quick rounds, then we move on to the next session, right? I see many hands. I see many hands already, but I'll start with the lady here. Then I'll go to the gentleman there, then the gentleman there, then that gentleman and that gentleman in order. Start with this lady here. So let's just be quick, focused with our question, okay, and direct it to anyone.
To the public. For me, I have a question for them. When it comes to election, they go to the what do we call, the politicians. They engage with the interfaith in terms of corruption I'm talking about, and in terms of money. How are we going to deal with that?
Did you get the question? Yes, okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my name is Abubakar. I've had like 20 questions, but I'll ask only 2. So one goes to Ambassador. You had a very vibrant program, the EKS. I was part of it. So I'm just wondering the timing. I know resources are problematic. I'm just wondering, the timing was, I thought, was too close to the elections. So I'm just wondering if this is something you want to consider moving forward, so that the impact can be even more felt. I mean, we can feel the impact. All right. And then the second question goes to it can be interfaith and even the ambassador. You see, and I had a discussion with my friend Janak. When you look at the current situation in the country, there's a feeling that many people have not healed. Even this conference is questionable with the tagline "consolidated gains." So people are asking what gains, for example. Kuna uchungu tu ingine ya kimataifa. So I'm just wondering, can we rethink so that we don't do peace programs up to elections? Can we now, even now, this is the right time to reach out to people who are hurting? Do you have plans for that? Because I think it's critical. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Just go ahead then.
Yes, my name is Mwangi Muraya, and shortly after promulgation of our constitution...
Raise your voice a bit.
Yes, I'm saying shortly after promulgation of our constitution in the year 2010, Kenyans were bold enough to give life to Chapter 6. And the best example was when a high-ranking judicial officer degraded a Kenyan for simply being a mere security guard for lack of not knowing people. The ordinary Kenyan invoked Article 1 concerning power and sovereignty at the hands of Kenyans. At the end of the day, the ordinary Kenyan gave life to Chapter 6, and the officer resigned. What do faith-based organizations think can be done to give life back to Chapter 6, because it seems to be dead, and life of Chapter 6 matters?
Thank you very much for the question around Chapter 6 and how we can give life to it. Please, this gentleman over here.
Thank you. I am Stephen Nally of Pastoralist Community Development Organization, based and working in Marsabit County. And for almost since 2017, we have been experiencing a lot of conflict in Marsabit County. And we really appreciate the good work of NCIC and the interfaith as key players in working on the peace building. We really appreciate that. At the same time, we know that the faith-based institutions have been also observers all over the country during the general election. But at the same time, we know that almost like every Sunday or Friday, they are being given a lot of money by these politicians in the name of constructing either the church or mosque. So as an interfaith, as religious leaders whom we trust most and have a lot of confidence in, how are you set, or how have you been addressing this corruption you allow on these holidays? Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question. Let's just pick that, then we come this side. There is one more there, then we will come this side, right? Just be patient.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Francis Kea. My observation go to the second last presenter about religious. One thing is the problem we have in this country is about religious. Now they are telling us they are the solution solver. They are the one who can ban this country, because some of them, they are biased. And we know them. And we have done our investigation. Some of them were given money so that they campaigned for a certain presidential candidate. And now they are telling us they are the problem solver. Please, can you catch up your standard so that you can make this country to be in one unity? Because we know some of them are just biased, the way we know things in this country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The concern is noted. Before you get to, I'll come back to you in the next round. We'll do a next round. Just be patient, okay? Allow me to just ask for reactions. I'll begin with Ambassador, if there is anything that you would like to react to.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator, and thank you all for the questions you've asked. Some were comments, and for instance, in Marsabit County, what is happening there, it's something that I think I alluded to briefly. In terms of the programs we're doing, I do acknowledge, yes, some of the activities were pretty close to the elections, and that is not ideal, but as we recall, one of the key concerns we had going into this election was our level of preparedness across the board, not just, of course, with the institutions, but also with the players. For instance, the resources were released very late for IEBC to prepare and so on. And of course, this is not ideal. One of the lessons we picked up going forward, we're encouraging everyone, all the actors, to try and do this earlier, to begin preparing for the next election much earlier, so that it takes root. So I agree with you. And yes, we are looking to do more programs, more activities. There are about 5 more left between now and September, and hopefully we'll do a lot more. We've received invitations from state agents, from different groups, and I think just for the benefit of the others, what the question was asking about was there is a particular program that we conduct on leadership that builds capacities, especially in conflict areas, in offering dispute resolution that is more dynamic, and it's different from what we normally do. And we found that it's been received very, very well, and it's something that we're looking to have institutionalized. And so in terms of timing and so on, yes, that would be my response. What have the gains been? I think it's true when you say that there is some parts of the country where there's still a feeling of hurt, and it's been, it's real. And what needs to be done, and I think it's key, that all the actors get involved in this. We may be having peace, but it may be simply a resignation, and some people may begin to isolate themselves. The idea is to get them back on board. That is why cohesion and integration is key. The kind of manner in which we speak, the manner in which we do our programs, should be one that moves towards uniting, unifying, rather than having that distinction. And that should be one of the things we learn after an election. How do you conduct that process to bring people together, rather than keep the divisions going? But at what point do you cut off the rhetoric from an election and move on? And I think that will be key in recovery and moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think there was one question on chapter 6. How do we make it alive? I think that is everyone's question as a Kenyan. How do we make this chapter 6 alive? When I made remarks, I talked about lack of clarity when it comes to election and clearing of these people who we deem they are not fit to hold public office. And we say there is an overlap between IBC and ESCC, and that is why we say if the mandate is solely put under the ambits of ESCC, then there would be some... And whatever decision they make on the vetting of these politicians and those seeking for public office would be final, and that would help to make a little bit clarity, a lot of clarity in terms of who is to vie for this political office. From the context you talked about, the judicial officer who demeaned a security guard, and finally she was shown the door, I would say the enforcement of the law is very important. If we enforce the law to the latter, that will be very, very critical in terms of making these our laws very live and people to know that it works. So the enforcement is very important. Article 993, as I talked about, I forgot to mention that politicians, perhaps, there is belief that politicians introduce this article just for them. Just in case, if someone is barred from seeking public office, then it would be a point where they would seek a lot of refuge in and say, we've not exhausted all the avenues for appeal, including also sentence review. So again, we need to look into this, and it is our view that, or my view as an individual, as a Kenyan, that if we need to look into this so that we don't have laws that conflict each other, but at the same time, complement and supplement each other and every other time. So for this to be alive, enforcement, and then we need to have clarity of roles amongst our institutions. Thank you.
Very well. Kaka Tamala.
Thank you very much. I'll just give a response to two things. Number one, on leadership and integrity. This country, I don't know who people follow. There's a year 2017 election, even these elections, we came up as Christians with what you call pastoral letter, documenting qualities of a good leader. Who should we vote? 1, 2, 3, a long list up to number 10. Qualities of corrupt. Who are these ones who should not vote? But can I tell you, Christians read these things and they did the opposite. So who do they follow? Do they follow what they are told in church, or what the politicians who they believe in say? That is food for thought. They still went ahead and voted what? They voted these people with this bad character, even after being told in the church, we sang about it in radios, but Kenyan will just go, when it's a day of voting, I don't know what drives us. It's not about oh, this person is good. There's something called tribalism here. And the blood of this tribalism, I think, some people see it is even thicker than what they proclaim as blood of Christ, if you see the way they behave. So that one I've answered about leadership integrity. You can preach to Kenyans about this, but if they go to vote, I don't know what happens in their mind. Number two, Harambee is in churches. As Catholics, I'll not speak to other churches, we came up with guidelines, because politicians during elections, they even sit in front of the church. Other days, they are backbenchers. But when elections near, they sit in front and they want to be recognized. If there's any contributions, they are running, and they can launder money. Bad monies can corrupt even my good money that I contribute. So as Catholics, Anglicans, we came up with regulations. Even disclosure, if anything above 50,000, there's a way, if it's a gift, what for? It's open. Anything above some amount of money there should not be taken in the church. But you know, again, the way the church is diverse. Sometimes you hear one case somewhere, then you only pick on that. I'm aware of checks that were returned to politicians in these elections by the church leaders, but nobody's speaking about them. Big amounts of money. We don't want your money. It happened in these elections. Thank you very much.
Wow. My brother was very frank. I will look at the issues you've raised from two perspectives. One is about money, political campaigns, and biased religious leadership. That's on one side. And then, the religious teachings on peace, which is a continuous theme, I know. In church and in mosques, whenever we meet, we can never end our prayer without mentioning peace. Now the question is, do we mainstream peace in our lives, or is it just a statement when we are in this place of worship? When we leave this place of worship, when we go outside, do we practice the elements of peace? That's a very personal decision for all of us to start thinking about. A preacher can preach, as they say, from morning to evening. But if you're not listening with the intention of following, then you're also wasting your time in church or in the mosque. Why are you there? I believe we all go to religious place of worship to learn something that we can practice. That is the fundamental. Otherwise, you don't have to go and stay in a mosque, listen to these very wonderful sermons, or go to church and listen to the pastor or the bishop giving these wonderful teachings, and then you don't practice them. What is the point? So we still have an issue as human beings, as Kenyans, to realize that in as much as we are very spiritual, and it is known all over the world that Kenyans are very religious and very spiritual, there is a disconnect in how we practice that spirituality in our daily lives. There is a conversation that needs to be within ourselves to make that happen. When it comes to leadership taking, biased positions, yes, it happened. It happens. But for me, is to what extent does it happen? I can tell you, I do vote, and I do support a certain political persuasion. I do that, but it's very quiet. The danger is when I come to the pulpit and start preaching using scriptures, but trying to persuade the congregation to go in a particular political direction. That is wrong. And it should not happen. It should not happen. Politics, unfortunately, is what guides political decisions that again distribute resources from where we all come from. There is competition in that. But it's important for religious leadership to stay away from that conversation. Let politicians do their thing. When they go wrong, then we have the right to stand in our pulpits and tell them, you have gone wrong here. Please, if you can, come back and begin the journey from here. That is our role, but not to take positions that are going to divide this country. I think that's basically what I learned from these questions, unless there are some more.
Thank you very much. Let's clap for them again, please. As I promised, we'll take one more round of questions and comments. And just want to remind our participants online, our virtual participants, please, the chat box is available. You can always share your comments, your question, and we will react to them with time. Please feel free to do that. I also shared that we need to just go to our Twitter handles and continue tweeting as we engage. I will be taking the last round of questions and comments, then we break for tea, right? And as I promised, we'll start with the two gentlemen that side. Then the lady there and the gentleman behind there. Then we have those 4 questions, and then we do the responses and break for tea. Is that okay? Very well. So start over there.
Yeah. My name is Caleb from EFA, and first I just want to affirm the church, the spiritual organizations for what they did before, during, and after the elections. That was a job well done. But I also have a challenge to both the church and the Muslim community. There are some leaders in churches and in mosques who are doing very good job, but you find that sometimes they are discouraged from vying because we treat politics as if it is for some bad people somewhere, and it's not for us. So that is a challenge. Sometimes, I'm not saying all churches and mosques, but you find some very good leaders being told to keep away from politics, and yet we need to attain the chapter 6. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that question. The gentleman next.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm Rabwa Nixon from the great county of Kakamega. I would want to thank all the discussants and the presenters on the fantastic presentation. Mine is more of a clarification from Bwana Ambassador. He talked about that there is a way we have things in law that we do not mostly practice, and then that there are systems that already do exist. I was assuming he meant also cultural system, like the way we saw in Rwanda during the genocide. Because of the high number of cases, they did resort to a traditional mechanism for dispute resolution, which was very effective. So I wanted to know, was he alluding to that, or he meant, because also he talked about mainstreaming these things into our law. So was he talking about this traditional type of setups, or he had something else in mind? And if that is the case, in the works they're doing in the central region or the areas of Isiolo, have they seen some of those things working out? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The lady, then we go to the gentleman behind. The lady over there is another lady here.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Esther Mwikali. My question goes to the ambassador about the strengthening strong institution. He alluded that we need strong institution. But personally, I think we need strong actions, not strong institutions, because most of the institutions do not take action. Let me just go for, and also he also said, our constitution was not done in a way that what we practice was put in the constitution. I think it was. If you go to Article 10 of our constitution, it's about the principles and values. So I think it was done, but what is lacking is the action. For example, before our constitution, people used to practice, people were punished, but now we don't see anybody being penalized for any crime. For example, what is hard with, let's get, for example, a police and a person in a matatu, the driver. The driver gives the police the money and the police receives. What is so hard with that institution that is mandated with the integrity, taking one person in the community, gives that camera, goes to in that matatu, then in the evening, all the people who are receiving and giving money are being captured. So, I think personally, we lack the action, not the institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have the lady here, then we go to the two, okay, there are two gentlemen. The lady here in front of you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rahab Kenana, CCM party from Narok. Thank you so much. I've been silently following the observations after the election since yesterday. And mine goes to the church institution or faith-based institution that are becoming a very important part in our political arena. They're also a very important part in our daily lives. Because one, church is where we go for our spiritual needs, and it is also a very good place to mobilize people every Sunday. So you have become a target of many things. I come from rural Narok, and in every Sunday, we have gatherings. And one of the things is, one of the growing institutions is churches. I really want to put across a challenge to the churches and the faith-based organization. Let us do a check of the fundraisings. For example, in Narok, there is always a fundraising in one church or another one because they are also organized. And the governor is there taking 2 million, 3 million. What money is that? That is money for development. But I also I'm not accusing that, but I think those are the same Kenyans. So if money goes to the church, it's also part of our own development, because the Christians are Kenyan citizens. So what we want to do, I want the churches to revisit that. If you are going to be put in the CIDP as part of development, that will be clean money, and we will never complain. Because churches are part of us, we are building them for our own children, for our own future. So I want us to revisit that, because that will be, we will not start blaming the church as they are corrupt, they are getting money from politicians. Another thing, when there is, for example, a fundraising, they want a politician there. But during elections, they say we don't want politics in church. So is that really sincere? So I'm just putting across, church is very important in mitigating peace. Church is very important because it's an institution that is trusted by everyone. But I think I was expecting good response from SUPKEM, but you have not touched on real issues. Kenyans are questioning the church when it comes to politics, but we are also part of the whole system. So let us see how we can work with the people, we can work with the politicians, and how you also need to lobby so that you become part of the development, so that the money can be accounted for. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Point well taken. So we take the last two behind there. The last two questions behind there, then we react to that, and we go for tea break.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Maraka Matara from KCA. One of the reasons given for non-implementation of Chapter 6 of the Constitution was lack of public trust in the requirements. Now my question is, why do you think the people who input would go against their own views? How can that situation be averted in the future? Because we might also amend parts of the Constitution. Number two, the interreligious faith is still in place. But a storm is building from a section of the opposition over disenchantment of certain issues. What role dissipate the looming problem? Where does your responsibilities start?
We are not able to follow your question, please.
Which one?
We are not able to follow you at all. Just repeat very fast, please.
Yeah, number one, Transparent International said one of the reasons why Chapter 6 of the Constitution is not being implemented is lack of public trust in that section. Then I asked, why do you think the people who gave the views on that chapter would go against their own views? And how can that be averted in the future when, for example, some amendments will be done to the Constitution?
Very well, it is understood. The next question.
Then number two, the interreligious faith is still intact. A storm is building from a section of the politicians what role are you playing to dissipate the conflict? Thank you.
Very well, thank you. The last question, please.
Yeah, my name is William Akosimaina from KCA. My question is about the preparation of by-election which is coming. That one is going to IBC. Because already some of the officials who have left the office of IBC, I think there's a lot of worry in those by-election in different, areas in Kenya. So do we have, as maybe we are here, maybe collecting some views and discussing what will happen next. And these are some of the things that NGOs and maybe government officials have been meeting, discussing on what will be next. So what is the way forward to the coming by-election? Do we have any worry that those by-election could be postponed? Because as I understand per now, maybe the IBC officials or the IBC as a body is not ready for that election. Question number 2 goes to the religious leaders. I think there's a split, and we are not agreeing, or some of the church leaders are not agreeing. Everyone is taking his or her route. There are some of the leaders from the church who are saying that let's go this way. We come out with the laws that we don't even follow. We'll get some of church leaders, or they have splitted because of the split of, due to the circulation of the money that is going around. As it has already been said, if you are not sure and not serious with what is happening with the leadership of the religious in Kenya, then that means that we are also misleading Kenyans, because what we say from the church is not what we follow. So my concern is that let the church leaders come out very clearly and put all the laws that have been being formed on record, and let them be implemented every time they talk. And when they are meeting these politicians every time, let them show Kenyans that whatever we are saying is what we are doing. Thank you.
Very well, thank you very much for the questions. We'll do a quick round of response, then we close the session, retire the speakers, and break for tea. But I just want to remind all of us that we are also streaming this on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. And you can access this through all the other channels. You know, the partner organizations have channels that you can also access this as well. Yes. Quick.
Thank you. The moderator is asking me to be very quick. However, the questions put to me are those that require a bit of time, but I will not take time. In fact, when I was alluding to the points I made, I was cognizant that this may be something that requires a deeper conversation to understand the context. And these two issues are, someone said, there's a lady who said that what we require is strong action, maybe not strong institutions. And then I think there's a question also put that what did we mean by traditional vis-a-vis what's in the in written law. Now, where I'm coming from, the thought is this. Let me first indicate that as a lawyer, I'm a firm believer in the rule of law. I believe in the Constitution. And the document is a good document. But the issue I was addressing was the disconnect between what is in writing and what is practiced. Our understanding, our relationship with it. In fact, if you go to any home, away, say from the city, from yourselves, go into the villages, the first interaction, what shapes the life of the child in the village, is not so much what is written in our books, but what the elders in that village, what the parents believe to be right and wrong. All right? That's the first interaction with what shapes their lives as they grow up. In fact, that is what defines for them who a proper leader is, who a member of society is. The big values are based on your experiences in your locality. All right? Now, what then I also referred to is many of our countries in Africa, in Asia, are built on a model that we embraced from the West, which was the final product of a 30-year war in Westphalia. All right? Now, how they built that country and the state system was taking on board years of history in that environment. Now, we took that system without its history, and we're applying it in our context where we have a different history. So it's not even is a dangerous area I'm venturing into, even when it comes to the faith. Our interaction, if you look at Christian life in Kenya, it's not more than 100 years old. All right? Before then, we had our own traditions, that how we worshipped and believed in. So these are things that we are learning. That is why the preaching is done. We're trying to embrace it and conform to our own liking. Many of us would say we're in church on Saturday, on Sunday, and you believe in God. If we asked you, are you God-fearing, you'd say so. But the moment you step out of that space where you're discussing this, you will fall back to your default mode, which, if you look deeply, may be very inconsistent with what has been taught in the church. Not because you're defiant, not because you're being difficult, but it's not ingrained in you. It's something you're learning and trying to aspire to. And that's what we need to embrace. And when I meant that, I don't say we shut away and embrace traditional ways of, but we need to think of how to bring those two together. And until it's what the parents at home are teaching our children. Today, if you're called and told your brother or sister has been arrested, the first thing you're thinking of, as a Kenyan, I will tell you, is who do I know? Who knows the policeman? Who can get out that person? In the West, it's different. As soon as someone is arrested, you begin looking for a lawyer. Because you trust the system, you know how it works, you know what it means. So until we bring that together, we'll always have this challenge. And I'm sure that's what affects chapter 6. You as NGOs and the rest, you understand what is in that chapter. But go home, go to Isiolo and ask them if they know that chapter. Really, if they actually understand it. Not that they don't embrace it, but is it something they connect with? And they feel that a leader cannot be a person who those values are violated or are different from. For them, it's a matter of survival on the ground. Basic stuff. Today they're faced with drought. How do I survive on this drought? A leader is someone who can get them out of that situation. That's whom they define. So how do we bring these two ideas together? When I mentioned that the Constitution in Australia is only six articles, in America 8 articles, I did not mention in Kenya, our Constitution is comprised of 260 articles. 200 articles. Why? It's because we were trying to elaborate as much as possible in a way that we can understand and relate to. So it's something alien that we're trying to embrace. That bit is where the disconnect lies, and we need to ensure that we can cover it in order for us to embrace this and move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir, for elaborating something around the ethos and ethics. My brother, you asked a question on public trust. I said it's public appreciation. It's not that they don't trust. They do the trust, but they don't appreciate. Of course, we've made a lot of tremendous engagements around this, including the campaign I talked about, messaging we talked about, creation of awareness, and I'm sure some are conscientized, that is high level of awareness. But unfortunately, the ethos becomes a big issue when it comes to chapter 6 of our Constitution. Because our citizens cannot separate the challenges and corruption. My brother has spoken about the issues they are struggling in the ground. And now the politician coming into play and having tainted image and also integrity issues and bringing that little money and little resources they bring to the people, so that there is no distinct difference between the challenges they are facing and the corruption by the citizens. That has to be looked into. And of course, we face the challenge. The politicians comes into play. And the gains that we've made around chapter 6, again, they do their undoing. You understand that? Now they water it down and ensure that they bring in other things. I talked about Article 99, 3 of our Constitution, and I said it is deliberate. We believe, most of us believe, that the politicians put it there for their own safety, so that if they are taken, to task on the other side of chapter 6, then they run to this article and then they get refuge from there. Then they are cleared and they vie for this election. So there is a lot that need to be done in promoting our ethos as an institution. And just to conclude, because I don't know if I'll be giving more another time, is I talked about conscientization. There is a lot to be done around awareness on chapter 6 of our Constitution amongst the citizens, so that we get to appreciate what gains we are going to make when we uphold the chapter 6 of our Constitution. Again, we need to leverage on research and knowledge. A lot of research, a lot of knowledge generation, so that the policy makers, the judiciary, can have something they can run to when they are making the decisions around chapter 6 of our Constitution. And lastly, the partnerships. Think around the 1980s, think around the 2000s, when we came together, a lot of stakeholders, the church, faith-based organizations, CSOs, including also the media, for the sake of having a new constitutional dispensation in our country. In the same vein, then we need to rally together again to ensure that we ensure there is enforcement of chapter 6 to the latter. So there is a lot of need for us to strategize around partnerships so that we make chapter 6 a reality in our country. Thank you.
For me, I know matters of faith are very personal, and matters of faith are the ones really who define who we are. I can be a very nice person in front of you, but when I leave this room, I'm a very bad person. And this speaks to chapter 6. It's that simple. Chapter 6 begins with you and me. It is for me to make sure that I look at the areas that we are all being mentioned in chapter 6 and said, do I qualify for this? Do I qualify for this? It is for you to make that decision. Because that decision collectively will make this country different from what it is today now. I don't know whether it is right to mention that money, yani pesa, at the moment, seems to have, or the need to get money any way you can, seems to have put everything to do with our values away. Even religion has been kept aside in pursuit of money. Families have been abandoned because someone does not have money. Not that you don't want to support your family, but you just don't have the money. And the burden on men at the moment in the world, I think Kenya is the worst case scenario. The burden on men in Kenya in terms of taking care of their families is very, very big. And there are many issues that we are learning from our own media about mental health issues. There's a lot of people with mental health issues that the root cause is money. I just don't have the money. And then I have all these responsibilities. So you can imagine if a politician comes to you when you're in that state of mind, he will take the money. Let us be frank, we are human beings. Who will take that money? So I don't want to say more than that, Peter. I think the point is made, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you very much, the plenary, for the good questions and the comments, and our speakers and the discussants for the key highlights and the responses, the discussions that have followed. Allow me at this stage to just recognize two guests who have joined us. We have with us the Archbishop of Mombasa, the Right Reverend Martin Kivuva, who is also the chairperson of the Dialogue Reference Group. The Bishop has just come at the right time when we are just finishing the topic where he was supposed to sit in as well. But welcome, Bishop. Feel free to interact with the Bishop during tea break and the remainder of the time that we have for today. Allow me to also recognize the Deputy Secretary, Judicial Committee on Elections, who has also joined us here, Ndugu Mulochi, karibu sana. And all the other guests and participants who have joined us now, you are all welcome and recognized. So with those few remarks and with what we've gone through in the first session today, which is quite enriching, allow me to now retire this panel, the presenters and the discussants, and let's appreciate them again as they retire now. Well done, and we also appreciate ourselves for the participation, the interaction, both here physically and virtually. We are all appreciative of the participation, the interaction. We'll now break for tea. Tea is just served by the tent outside here. The time now is 11:25. So please, can we take just 30 minutes? 30 minutes of tea break. So we come in back here by 11:55. Yes, 11:55, so that we begin the sessions, the two sessions that will combine together before we break for lunch. So I wish you all well. Enjoy your tea, enjoy your coffee, enjoy your hot chocolate, and whatever bitings out there.
ni fahari yetu, undugu ndio nguvu, chuki na ukabila hatutaki hata kamwe. Lazima tuungane, tuijenge nchi yetu, pasiwe hata mmoja anayetenganisha. Naishi na tumaini, najitolea daima Kenya. Hakika ya bendera ni uthabiti wangu, nyeusi ya wananchi na nyekundu ni ya damu, kijani ni ya ardhi, nyeupe ya amani. Daima mimi Mkenya, mwananchi mzalendo. Kwa uchungu na mateso, kwa vilio na huzuni, tulinyakuliwa uhuru na mashujaa wa zamani. Hawakushtushwa na risasi au kufungwa gerezani, nia yao ukombozi, kuvunja pingu za ukoloni. Naishi na tumaini, najitolea daima Kenya. Hakika